hung low, casting a soft, pale light over the quiet streets of the city. It was one of those nights that seemed to stretch on forever, the air cool but not cold, just the right kind of breeze that made you feel like you were floating in a dream. I walked along the cobbled street, the familiar sound of my shoes tapping lightly against the stones. It wasn't late, just past sunset, but there was a peaceful hush settling over everything, as though the world was preparing for something special, something gentle. I had no particular destination, just the urge to walk, to clear my mind. My footsteps seemed to guide me, effortlessly, as though my body knew exactly where it needed to go. I glanced around, taking in the sleepy atmosphere of the neighborhood. The lights from the windows of cozy homes created little pools of warmth in the night. Everything felt still, yet alive in its own way. I passed a little alley where a soft, warm glow caught my eye. The scent of something familiar, something comforting, filled the air. My stomach grumbled, softly, almost shyly. Pizza. I smiled to myself. It was funny how the simplest things could feel like a gift on nights like this. Drawn in by the warm light and the delicious smell, I stepped into the alley. It was narrow, lined with potted plants and vines that grew over the stone walls, creating a feeling of being tucked away from the rest of the world. At the end of the alley stood a small, charming pizzeria. The sign above the door read simply, "A night at a Neapolitan Pizzeria." There was something about it that felt familiar, like I had been here before, though I was certain I hadn't. But I didn't question it. The place seemed to beckon me in, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The door creaked open as I pushed it gently, and a wave of warmth and the sound of soft chatter greeted me. Inside, the pizzeria was cozy and intimate, with soft lighting, rustic wooden tables, and a fireplace crackling in the corner. The air was thick with the smell of freshly baked dough and rich tomato sauce, making me feel even more at ease. "Welcome," a voice greeted me from behind the counter. A man stood there, his smile kind and welcoming. There was a sense of calm about him, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I felt an immediate sense of belonging. It was as if this place, this night, had been made for me. I ordered a simple pizza, and as I sat at a small table by the window, I let myself relax. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only the warmth of the pizzeria and the quiet comfort of being here. As I sat there, gazing out the window at the quiet streets, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The lights from the pizzeria flickered softly, casting gentle shadows across the walls. Everything felt so calm, almost unreal, like time itself had slowed down. It wasn't just the atmosphere of the pizzeria, though. It was something more, something inside me, a sort of weight lifting off my shoulders. I took a deep breath, savoring the quiet. The sound of laughter and conversation in the background was soft, distant, as if the pizzeria existed in a world all its own. The people here seemed content, in no rush, as though they had all the time in the world. It was a far cry from the hustle and bustle of my usual days. Here, I could let go of the noise. As I waited for my pizza, I noticed the man behind the counter again. He was busy, moving with practiced ease, but there was something about the way he moved, so calm, so deliberate, that made me feel as though he wasn't just preparing food. He was creating something special. I watched him for a moment, captivated by the way he worked. When our eyes met for the briefest of moments, His gaze was kind, almost knowing, but there was something else there, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. He smiled again, a smile that seemed to invite you in, to make you feel like you were exactly where you needed to be. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something behind his eyes, but it passed so quickly that I wondered if I had imagined it. "Your pizza will be ready in just a moment," he said, his voice soft and soothing, like the calm before a storm that never came. There was something about the way he spoke that made me want to linger, to stay just a little longer. I nodded, a bit absent-mindedly, and turned my attention back to the window. The quiet streets were still bathed in moonlight, the shadows of the trees swaying gently in the breeze. It was as if the world outside was asleep, and this small pizzeria was the only place where the night was still alive. It felt almost magical, like a secret tucked away in the heart of the city. And then, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I turned, half expecting it to be the man with my pizza, but instead, it was a woman, one I hadn't noticed before. She moved gracefully, almost as if she was floating, her steps light and soundless. She paused by the counter, her voice low as she ordered something in a language I didn't quite recognize. It was a soft, melodic sound, one that made the air feel even more peaceful. The man behind the counter nodded, his smile widening just a fraction, as though this woman was no stranger to him. There was an unspoken connection between them, one that felt warm, welcoming, like this place had been built not just for food, but for something more, a sense of belonging, of peace. As I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in the air, that this night, this pizzeria, was somehow different from any other. Something was unfolding, slowly, just beneath the surface. But for now, I let it be, content to simply enjoy the stillness, to savor the moment. The woman took a seat at a nearby table, her presence almost ethereal. I could feel her gaze on me, though she didn't speak. There was something about her, an aura of calm that seemed to draw the quiet in even closer. The pizzeria, already peaceful, felt even more serene with her sitting there, like the night itself was deepening. I could hear the soft murmur of voices, but they no longer felt like sounds. They felt like whispers in the air, like the evening itself was breathing in time with us. I sipped my drink, savoring the taste, and allowed myself to relax deeper into the quiet. My mind was starting to wander, but in a peaceful, dreamy way. It was as though the space between each thought had grown wider, allowing me to breathe without rushing. Suddenly, the man returned with my pizza. He placed it gently in front of me, and I couldn't help but notice how the steam rose from the dish, filling the air with that delicious, comforting scent. He gave me a knowing smile as he set it down, then quietly stepped away, leaving me with the warm glow of the pizzeria and the soft crackle of the fire. I took a bite, and the first taste was like nothing I'd ever experienced. The flavors were simple: tomato, basil, mozzarella, but they blended together in a way that felt almost magical. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the food settle into me, grounding me. It was the kind of pizza you could eat slowly, savoring every bite as if you didn't want it to end. As I ate, I noticed the woman again. She was watching me now, her eyes calm, studying me in a way that didn't feel intrusive, but rather curious. I felt a slight unease stir within me, but it quickly faded, replaced by the comfort of the moment. After a few seconds, she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "You look like you needed a place like this," she said. Her words were simple, but there was something in them that made my heart beat a little faster. I looked up at her, surprised, not sure what to say. There was something about her tone, as if she could see into my thoughts, see the weight I'd been carrying all day. I didn't even realize how much I needed it, I admitted, a small smile forming on my lips. It's like this place has a way of making everything feel lighter. She nodded slowly, as though she understood exactly what I meant. "That's the magic of this pizzeria," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has a way of reminding people that there's more to life than the chaos outside, that sometimes all you need is a little space to breathe, to pause." Her words were comforting, like a soft embrace. I wasn't sure if it was the pizza, the warmth of the fire, or her presence, but I felt my shoulders drop, the tension I hadn't even realized I'd been holding easing away. It was as though the world outside didn't matter here. I could stay forever, letting the quiet lull me into a peaceful state. "You've been here before, haven't you?" I asked, curious. It felt like she was a part of this place, as though she belonged to it in a way that was beyond explanation. She smiled gently, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. "In a way, yes," she replied, her voice distant, as if she were remembering something long past. "But that's a story for another time." I wanted to ask more, to know about her, about this place, but I didn't. There was something about the moment that felt complete just as it was, as though I wasn't meant to know everything right now, and that was okay. I finished my pizza, savoring every last bite, feeling more at ease than I had in a long time. The quiet stretched out around us, the warmth from the fire enveloping me like a blanket. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly at peace. The night deepened, the soft glow of the pizzeria a warm contrast against the cool, dark streets outside. I leaned back in my chair, the last of my pizza eaten, and the gentle hum of conversation around me felt like a lullaby. The man behind the counter was wiping down the surface, his movements slow and deliberate, adding to the peaceful rhythm of the night. The woman who had spoken to me earlier remained in her seat, her eyes closed now, as if she were meditating or lost in some peaceful thought. The air felt different now, thicker somehow, as though the quiet had taken on a deeper meaning. The fire crackled softly in the corner, its glow flickering across the room, casting soft shadows that danced against the walls. For a moment, I thought I heard a voice, a whisper, almost inaudible. But when I turned, there was no one near me, and I realized it must have been the wind outside. Still, there was something unusual about this place, something that made me feel as though I had entered a world where time didn't exist. The hours that had passed felt like mere moments, the night unfolding like a delicate dream, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had stumbled into something beyond just a pizzeria. A soft chime from the door signaled the entrance of another guest, but when I looked, no one had walked in. I glanced at the man behind the counter, who seemed unfazed, his focus never wavering from his task. I turned my attention back to the woman who had spoken earlier. She was looking at me again, her gaze steady and calm. "Sometimes," she said, her voice like a soft breeze, "things come to us when we least expect it. We don't always understand them at first, but they lead us to where we need to be." I nodded, not quite sure what she meant, but there was something about her words that felt comforting. like a truth I couldn't fully grasp but instinctively understood. Her eyes met mine again, and for a brief moment, I could feel the weight of her gaze, as though she were seeing something in me I hadn't yet realized myself. Without speaking further, she stood, moving toward the door. I watched as she passed me, her footsteps light and soundless, like she was gliding across the floor. As she reached the door, she paused and turned back to me. "Remember," she said, her voice almost a whisper now. "Sometimes the answers are simpler than we think. They're right in front of us." With that, she stepped outside, leaving the door to swing shut softly behind her. I sat there for a moment, her words echoing in my mind. The whole experience felt surreal, like a dream I wasn't ready to wake from. What answers? I wondered. What was I supposed to understand? I glanced around the room again, feeling as though the pizzeria had somehow shifted. The atmosphere felt deeper, richer now, as if something had changed in the air with her departure. It was as if she had brought with her a piece of the magic that lived here, and now it lingered in the space she had left behind. The man behind the counter met my eyes briefly before he turned away to take care of something else. I felt a sudden sense of longing, though I couldn't explain why. It was as though the quiet had become too loud now, the stillness almost too much to bear. The pizzeria seemed quieter now, the hum of conversation replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible stillness. I sat there, my thoughts swirling around in my head, unsure of what to make of everything that had happened. The woman's departure had left a lingering sense of mystery, a feeling that there was something more to this night than I could see. But I didn't press the thought. Instead, I let it drift, allowing the peace of the room to fill the empty spaces in my mind. The man behind the counter moved with a quiet efficiency, preparing a few last orders. His calm presence was a contrast to the restlessness I felt inside. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The hours had passed so smoothly, so effortlessly, that I hadn't noticed how late it had become. But even as the time ticked on, the pizzeria remained as timeless as ever, untouched by the passage of time. I leaned back in my chair, taking another deep breath, feeling the air cool against my skin. The breeze from the open window stirred the curtains, and I watched as the moonlight bathed the room in a soft glow. There was something hypnotic about the way the light flickered, casting long, gentle shadows that seemed to sway in time with the crackling fire. I was about to stand up when I heard the chime of the door again. This time, someone stepped in. A man, dressed in a long coat and a scarf. He looked around, his eyes scanning the room before settling on the counter. He didn't seem out of place, but there was something about his presence that felt different, as though he was a part of the same quiet rhythm that had already taken root in the pizzeria. He walked over to the counter and ordered something, his voice low but clear. As he spoke, I noticed the way the man behind the counter responded to him, almost as if they were in on some unspoken understanding. Their exchange was brief, but carried a weight that I couldn't place. The new man took a seat by the window, glancing around the room as if he was trying to make sense of the same strange peace that I had felt when I first entered. His gaze drifted toward me, and for a moment, I wondered if he, too, was feeling the same pull of this place, this night, that I had. I wanted to ask him if he felt it too, this strange sense of being in a moment that could stretch on forever, but something told me not to. The words seemed unnecessary. Here, in this pizzeria, in this moment, it felt like we were all connected by something unseen, something that didn't need explaining. We were all part of the same stillness, the same quiet rhythm. The man at the counter gave me a small nod, acknowledging me, as though he had been aware of my thoughts all along. I smiled back, though I wasn't sure what I was smiling about. It was as though everything in this place, every person, every moment, had a subtle, quiet meaning that I couldn't fully grasp, but I didn't need to. As the minutes passed, the new man continued to sit by the window, his eyes distant, lost in his own thoughts. I returned my gaze to the fire, watching the flames flicker in the hearth. It was then that I realized that the night was nearing its end. There was a softness to the air now, a deep sense of contentment, as if everything had come full circle. This place, this pizzeria, had given me more than just food. It had given me a space to let go, to breathe, to be still. As I stood to leave, I caught the man behind the counter watching me, his eyes soft, almost expectant. For a brief moment, I felt like I was about to step into a world that I had never fully understood, but that somehow, in this moment, felt like home. I stepped outside, the cool night air greeting me like an old friend. The street was quiet, and the moon above seemed to guide me, the gentle rhythm of my footsteps matching the beat of the night. And as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just experienced something that would stay with me long after I had left this place. But it was okay. I didn't need to understand it all. Sometimes, the beauty of a night like this was in the mystery, in the quiet moments that left you wondering what you had just witnessed. As I walked through the quiet streets, the night seemed to have shifted once again. The cool air felt a little crisper now, carrying with it the faintest hint of something I couldn't quite place. It was as though the city had taken a breath, held it, and now it was exhaling slowly, letting the calm settle deeper into my bones. I glanced back at the pizzeria, its soft light glowing in the distance like a beacon. The building looked unchanged, just as peaceful, but something about it felt distant now, as though I had stepped out of a dream and into the real world again. Still, the feeling that lingered in me was one of peace, of quiet understanding, as if the night had gently pulled back a curtain and allowed me to see something I hadn't known I needed to see. My steps were slower now, almost languid, as though the night was wrapping itself around me like a blanket. I wasn't sure where I was going, but it didn't matter. There was no rush. The streets were empty, save for a few stray cats who wandered beneath the flickering streetlights, their movements slow and deliberate, as though they too were caught in the rhythm of the night. I found myself drawn to a small park at the edge of the neighborhood, a peaceful spot I hadn't noticed before. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like a soft whisper, and the path through the park seemed to invite me in, as if it had been waiting for me. Without thinking, I stepped onto the path, my feet moving effortlessly as I walked deeper into the park. The further I went, the quieter it became. The city's hum faded into the background, replaced by the soothing sounds of the leaves and the distant murmur of the wind. There was something oddly comforting about the stillness. It was as though I had entered a place that existed outside of time, a space where nothing could disturb the peace that hung in the air. At the far end of the park, there was a bench beneath a tall oak tree. I made my way toward it and sat down, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath me. The bench faced a small pond, its surface smooth like glass, reflecting the pale light of the moon. I watched the water for a while, mesmerized by the ripples that appeared as if from nowhere, dancing across the surface and then fading away, leaving no trace behind. For a moment, I felt completely alone, but in the best way possible. There was no one here but me, no expectations, no noise, just the stillness of the night, the gentle sway of the trees, and the quiet of the pond in front of me. The world felt far away, and in that moment, I felt connected to everything and nothing all at once. The stillness was broken only by the sound of my own thoughts. What had just happened? What had I felt in that pizzeria? What was it about the woman, the man behind the counter, the place itself, that had felt so familiar, so calming? My mind swirled with questions, but I didn't feel the need to answer them. Not yet. There was no urgency, no rush to figure it all out. I closed my eyes, letting the cool air wash over me, listening to the rustling of the leaves, the soft croak of a frog in the distance. The world was so quiet here, so still. It was as though time had paused, allowing me to simply be. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I must have sat there for what felt like hours, the quiet of the park wrapping around me like a thick blanket. The moon had shifted slightly, its soft glow now illuminating the path behind me in a silvery light. The world seemed to be holding its breath, as if it too had paused in this moment, allowing me to rest. There was no need to rush. I could feel the gentle pull of sleep creeping up on me slowly, like a friend coming to visit. My eyelids grew heavier with each passing minute, but I didn't fight it. For once, there was no pressing need to be anywhere or do anything. I was simply existing, fully present in the quiet of the night. And then, from somewhere in the distance, I heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible at first. It was a melody, soft and haunting, like a lullaby drifting on the breeze. The sound grew clearer, and I realized it was coming from the direction of the pizzeria. It was a simple tune, nothing complex, but there was something in it that stirred something deep inside me, something I couldn't quite explain. I rose from the bench, drawn toward the sound, as though the music was calling me back. The park seemed to stretch on forever, but my steps were steady, moving in time with the melody. It was strange. How could I hear it so clearly from this far away? But there it was, unmistakable. The soft rhythm of the tune guiding me back to where I had started. The path through the park seemed to change as I walked, growing narrower, more winding. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the wind, and the moonlight danced between the leaves, casting long shadows on the ground. The sound of the music grew louder, more defined, and I quickened my pace, eager to reach the source of it. When I finally emerged from the park, I found myself back at the entrance to the alley, just outside the pizzeria. The music was now unmistakable, clear as day, coming from inside the restaurant. It was as if the entire place had come alive, humming with a quiet energy that I hadn't noticed before. The door was slightly ajar, and the warm light spilled out into the night, beckoning me in. I hesitated for a moment, standing in the doorway, unsure if I should go back inside. The night had felt so peaceful, so perfect, and I didn't want to disturb the stillness I had found. But the music, the soft pull of it, was impossible to ignore. It felt like a part of me, like I had always known. It would bring me back here. I stepped inside, and the scene before me was unchanged. The man behind the counter was still there, his back to me, tending to the fire. The woman was gone, but the air still carried the softness she had left behind. The melody, though, was stronger now, coming from a small piano tucked away in the corner. It was a simple tune, but there was something timeless about it, as though it had been playing here for centuries. I walked toward the counter, where the man turned to greet me, his eyes soft and knowing. "Back again?" he asked, his voice calm, as though he had been expecting me. I nodded slowly, unsure of what I was feeling, but not questioning it. "It's peaceful here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, that same warm, knowing smile, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his eyes, something familiar. "It always is," he said, his words gentle, as if they were meant for me alone. "Sometimes, you just need a place to rest, to let everything go. And when you're ready, you can leave or stay a little longer." I didn't know what to say to that. It was as though he understood something about me, something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. But in that moment, it didn't matter. I felt no need for answers. The peace I had found in this place was enough. It was all I needed. The fire crackled softly in the corner, its glow casting a warm, golden light across the room. The melody from the piano had slowed, almost fading into the background now, but its presence lingered in the air, like an unspoken promise. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in, the warmth, the soft light, the quiet rhythm of the pizzeria. It felt like a place untouched by time, a space where the world outside couldn't reach. I glanced at the man behind the counter, who had returned to his quiet task. His movements were steady, calm, and though he was busy, there was a sense of peace about him that made me feel as though nothing could disrupt the tranquility of this place. I was about to speak, to ask him something, anything, about what had been happening. But then I paused. What was there to ask? What could I possibly need to know? Everything I had experienced in the last few hours had already given me all the answers I needed. The answers weren't to be found in words or explanations. They were in the stillness, in the quiet moments that spoke louder than any conversation ever could. I walked over to the small table by the window where I had sat earlier. The view outside was the same. Silent streets bathed in moonlight, the distant sounds of the city muffled by the night. It was peaceful, but there was a different kind of peace now. It wasn't just the quiet of the pizzeria or the soft music in the background. It was something deeper, something that resonated inside me. The man behind the counter came over to me, placing a small glass of water in front of me without saying a word. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like everything I needed in that moment. I smiled in appreciation, but no words passed between us. There was no need for words. The music from the piano picked up again, a slow, soothing melody that seemed to match the rhythm of my breathing. It was as if the night had found its natural rhythm, and everything was aligned in perfect harmony. I sat there for a while longer, sipping the water, letting the peace of the pizzeria wash over me. The weight of the day, the noise, the rush, it all felt so far away now, as though I had stepped into a world where time didn't matter, where everything simply flowed. As I looked out the window again, I realized that I didn't need to understand everything that had happened tonight. I didn't need to make sense of the strange pull I had felt toward this place, the quiet connection I had shared with the woman, or the way the man behind the counter seemed to know exactly what I needed without me saying a word. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I had found something I didn't even know I was searching for. A space where I could simply be. A place where the noise of the world couldn't touch me. Where everything was just as it should be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found exactly what I needed. No questions, no answers, just peace. As the night stretched on, the music from the piano gently faded away, and the warmth of the fire slowly dimmed. The city outside was still, the quiet of the world holding steady in the embrace of the night. I stood up, feeling a sense of completion, as if this night had come to its perfect end. The man behind the counter gave me a nod, his smile soft and knowing. Without a word, I stepped toward the door, and as I passed through it, the cool night air greeted me like an old friend. I walked back down the alley, feeling lighter than I had in ages, the calmness of the pizzeria still with me, wrapping itself around me like a blanket. The city, the streets, the world, everything seemed just a little bit quieter. Now, as though the night had slowed everything down to a peaceful rhythm. And as I walked away, I realized that I didn't need to understand why the pizzeria had felt so special. It was enough to simply know that it had been exactly what I needed. A place of rest, of peace, where time didn't rush and the world could be still. The night was not over, and yet, in that moment, it felt like everything had come full circle.